Hi everyone, it's great to be here live with you today for the next 20 minutes. My name is Dania Meira. I am the Director Data Lift at the AI Guild. Welcome and thank you all for joining us today. We are the community of professionals fluent in data. Today with me is Rasmus Hauch. He is the Chief Technology Officer at 2021 AI, where he offers Grace AI GRC platform, full support for governance, risk, and compliance for AI and the necessary help and consulting to get started with it. If you have any questions for Rasmus, please send them in the chat. Thank you, Rasmus, for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Danny. And thank you very much for being here today. I really am looking forward to both this talk today and this discussion, and also for the 22nd of June and the conference in Berlin. So thank you very much for being here.
Yes, cool. Thank you for accepting to come to Berlin and presenting. I must say that I am very excited because also to be here with you today, but also because today is the third anniversary of the AI Guild. So our community is turning 3 years old, and I'm happy that we get to celebrate in a few weeks by being in person together in the summit. Yeah. And then just to get started, maybe you can share with us how did you get to where you are today and what does it mean for you? Like what do you do as a Chief Technology Officer?
Yeah, thank you very much, Tanya. So basically, what we do here at 2021 AI, I mean, going back when we started or when the company was founded, we started out in data science consulting, like many other companies, I suspect, and quite rapidly we moved into providing services and software to our customers, and now we're at a place where most of our customers are engaging with us on using the services, using the software, and also on the sort of on the AI side of things and data science side of things. I think we started out building and developing the MLOps part of the platform, which is basically modeled out of some of the influences of some of the big companies in Silicon Valley at the time, such as Airbnb and Amazon, because some of the people on the board are actually came from those positions. So basically, we started out on the MLOps side, and then I think around 3 years ago or 2 years ago, we got involved in a number of different customer projects where we were sort of saying to ourselves, well, now we are developing these machine learning models, but how and can we sort of ensure that these models are being have the right processes, that they go through the right processes in the development process, and in the testing and validation and deployment and operational phases of an AI project. And I think that was sort of the start of that journey. And basically, you can say that from my 25 years in the IT industry, I've sort of looked at it from a and I usually tell people that when we talk about it is that an AI project is not that different from a traditional IT project. It's all the traditional IT things, such as service level agreements, cybersecurity, and everything else that is related to our traditional IT projects. But then there's something on top of that, and that thing on top is, first of all, the capability to ingest and work with production data, but also to sort of have the ability to concurrently remeasure and potentially retrain and potentially redeploy applications in a live environment. And those kinds of things are sort of are sort of building sort of the fabric of the services that we provide to our customers. And a lot of customers are coming to us and saying, well, you know what, we have maybe a big organization and we have many data scientists employed, but we're not sure exactly that we're following the right processes. We're not even sure that our data scientist is doing it is even if we define a process, we're not sure it's being followed, and so on. So it's really about building higher quality, faster delivery of AI models in our organization, right? And I think for me personally, these things were really interesting, right? But I think what was also really interesting was the impact that disruptive technologies such as AI has on the on all the citizens of the world, right? So you can say that kind of impact is sort of technology can be used for both good and bad things, right? And I think if you look at it from an AI perspective, I was really interested in sort of looking at it from a perspective of saying, well, let's make sure that the people that use these technologies and the companies that deploy them are using them in a way that enforces transparency, that enforces fairness, that enforces oversight, human oversight, and explainability, and all of these concepts, right? So that was really the driving factor behind the company and the way it formed. So currently in 2021 AI, we are sort of have a lot of different customers typically in the regulated industry. So we have finance, pension, insurance, public sector, but also healthcare, pharma sector, and so on. So these are the typical kinds of customers that we're getting or that we have currently in the company, and are working with us to sort of be better at both the process side of things, the governance side of things, and also rolling out and deploying and operating these models in production. So that's really where we are at the moment. And it's a very interesting area, I think, also to work in, because there's I wouldn't say new concepts, but there's a lot of things happening both in the AI industry, but also in the areas of AI governance, in the areas of AI processes, and so on. And yeah, mentioning a few of those, you can say that the first one is that the EU released their EU AI Act some time ago now. We were actually a part of some of the initial discussions and reviews for the ALTE at that time. So that was a couple of years ago, which was about ensuring, it was basically a questionnaire going through where a customer that had potential models, they could go through this questionnaire, and then they could sort of enforce and review it. And that was all good and well, and very interesting areas to work with. But what we realized is also that these things can actually be supported on the technical side, right? You can write code in a way so that the governance is being enforced, so that the right processes are being followed. And this was basically what we started working with at a couple of years ago now.
I understood. So if I get it right, the idea is not only to have, let's say, the systems that are running, like developing and deploying the models, and then in another side, the questionnaire or the process, but rather to integrate those.
Correct. Yes, exactly. Yeah, so that's what we sort of perfected throughout the last couple of years, and most of the customers that we are, or all of the customers that we have, are sort of engaging and working with these things. So basically, if you look at it, so if we look forward on the conference, what I will talk about there is basically these different aspects around transparency and fairness and disclosure, privacy, environmental impact also, because and I think the challenge there is, how can you relate those kind of terms into what is happening with models, right? Because it's not like a one-to-one. You can't say any kind of AI model needs to be fair. That's a very sort of unclear statement, right?
Yeah, it's very broad. Yeah.
Exactly. So what we are sort of, because, and that really speaks into the conflict between the data scientist and the project team working on the models. So data scientists, developers, project managers also, and then on the other side, the legal team or the risk managers or the people that have some are worried about the risk, the overall risk in the company, right? So there's sort of a tension there, which is sort of that the legal team might have some legal statements, right? Or they say, well, you have the EU AI Act, you have the could be some financial regulation or some healthcare related regulation or whatever, and then and that has some very broad statements like it needs to be at a models needs to be accurate, models needs to be fair, uh, and transparency and so on. These things needs to be sort of translated. They needs to be applied to the real world, right?
Yes.
So the way and that's what I'm going to talk about at the conference a lot, is about sort of the translation between what is happening in the models and how the regulatory environment is looking like for a particular type of model in a particular type of industry, and so on. Because if you talk about fairness for a image recognition model or an NLP model, or tabular data where you're doing binary classification or something like that, it's totally different worlds, right? It's a different way to apply it, right? And
Yes.
the metrics and the implementation of that code and those models needs to be different also. Um, and, and
Yes.
then on top of that, there's also this in the data science community. There's kind of these like rule of thumbs, right? You when you build a model, you want to have a log-out score of so and so, then it's probably good, right? But and these rule of thumbs is something that is applied in the industry, but it's not really being carried out when it comes to organizational processes, right? It's just something that you might know or might not know when you're building models, and that's what
Yes.
we're trying to do.
Yes, I agree. And also, I think this is coming from the perspective of the developers or the practitioners. Um, it could be that you have some background and you do it in a certain way, but since data science is also kind of still new field and we have people coming from different backgrounds to do data science in companies, there might be some differences there. So even for the team that works in the development itself, this can vary from developer to developer. So I think it's quite interesting when you say that you work with organizations that care about the process or to establish a process, and that to have also the process being respected in a way
Mhm.
for people that are coming new to the field or for people that are already working with developing models. And there's also the point that you can take care of all of this during the development, but then once you deploy is a live system, right? The data
Mhm.
and the people interacting with the system, they will change. So there's also the aspect of keep monitoring it to ensure that everything that was taken care of during the development is also happening during the deployment or as long as the system is alive.
Yeah, and that that there's multiple factors, right? So if you take a large financial organization, the typical challenge for a data science team is actually not building the model or building the product. It is that they're met with a thousand different requirements within the organization itself to live up to all kinds of things, right? You have GDPR, you have the UAI Act, you have the cybersecurity regulations, and so on. So all of these things has to be done. And on top of that, there's also if you're working in a global environment, there's many different regulations, right? So there's in the US. There
Yeah.
is there's efforts to introduce regulation on AI as well. In Canada, they've had it since 2017. In China, there's even they released just recently a new paper and a new legislation on AI and the technology. It's different from the European and again different from the US in terms of the focus and the ways that it's used. But that really is a big challenge to the companies that are deploying models in multiple regions across the
Yeah.
world. So how do they relate to that, right? How do they relate to those principles? On top of that, there's also, the companies and organizations, they might have their own ethical or code of conducts, or they might have also some guiding principles within the company that they want to follow, right? And they want that sort of those kind of brand messages to reflect on the work actually being developed in the company. So again, how do you ensure that? So that's really the challenge, is to building these kinds of models in an environment where there's many types of regulations, where there's many types of ways of applying it in the organization. And that especially applies if it's a high risk area where you either have what we usually refer to as a harm aspect to it. So that can be financial harm, it can be physical harm, it can be also different areas of intangible harm as well. So it's like it's a broad concept really, and the ways and the controls that you need to implement on such models are also very much dependent on the type of model, the type of industry you're in, and so on.
Yes, I think this is also the direction that we go with the Data Lift Summit, or the reason why we do it is because from the exchanges between the community members, we all learned that we face challenges that might be common, but then the answer to those is very specific to the use case or to the context, to the business, and to what is it that you're trying to solve using the tool, which is the machine learning or AI model. So it makes a lot of sense also when you talk about the legislation, for example, being broad, but then you have to translate it somehow in a practical measure, and you have to keep track of that measure and so on. But how to make this translation is, I think, basically up to the company, right? So it's really, really interesting job that you are doing there to bridge this gap and do this translation.
Yeah, and what we're experiencing is our customers are saying, the data science teams, they are a little bit relieved because now they don't have to meet as many requirements. They just need to do their models in a specific way, and then the rest of the stuff is ensured through the process. So there's a little bit of leaning back and then focusing on building the good models, right? Which is the important aspect of it, obviously. And on the legal side, there's also a sort of a little bit of they can relax because they can see that all of the rules and all of the controls are being followed. So it sort of creates a more positive organizational environment, I would say, to introduce these kinds of concepts, right, in an organization. But it's also obviously a struggle to get it actually implemented in organizations, right? And I would say also that some companies out there, are trying to accomplish this by Excel sheets and meetings, but our sort of claim is that is also going to be very. I mean, it's possible, right? But it's also very time consuming. So if you think about it, like in a small bank or financial organization, you typically have somebody that is responsible for the financial or have the financial responsibility in the bank of giving out credits to its clients, and the way that they enforce these controls upon the people that are making the decisions is by Excel sheets and having meetings and so on, right? And it's a very time consuming process. And if you look at it from an AI perspective, there's also the aspects of retraining, right? So all the time when you are retraining your models, you're sort of relating the model to the external environment, and the models are changing over time. And if you need to keep track of that all the time on Excel sheets, you'll just end up spending all your time doing that, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of manual effort, and I can agree that this idea of not being or being able to focus on what is it that you are developing and knowing that the other side is assured that there is some quality control or that the process is being followed, is pretty much making everyone feel more confident that the solution will be used. And I think this is one of also the biggest challenges from moving from the development part to the deployment part, because then it's not only about technology itself or the model itself, but how it integrates in the context. And then all of those concerns start coming out. So if you look at it only after you develop, let's say, a proof of concept, then you have to address all of that. It might be a lot of rework as well. So it's pretty interesting when this is already established and you can start the project already knowing that when it's done and it's going to be deployed.
Yeah, exactly right. And on top of that, we're also seeing, if we look in the marketplace in general, we are also seeing companies that are failing to achieve this, right? So an example of that is Foodino case. It's an Italian food delivery company that was fined 2.6 million euros just a while back because the models that they developed were impacting people in the wrong way.
Yes.
So this is one example. There's a lot of them out there around court cases that have already been sort of established, not on the EU AI Act, but on things like human rights, and also in the healthcare and financial spaces, right? So there are cases already now on this issue, and this is also why I think the customers out there are getting a little bit nervous. What did that
Yes.
to me, and how can I avoid that, right? So
The risk, I think, is pretty clear, and how big it is also very clear. Then the question is how to address this and mitigate the risk.
exactly, yeah. And I think and I think that there's parts of it that can be solved using the technology, which is what we are proposing, right? But there's also parts of it that needs to be an organizational change, basically, right? And for that reason, we've also sort of opened up the company and said and invited partners in and said to everybody that wants to work with us, if you want to, you can come in as a partner, and we can join up in a sort of organizational change sort of thing, right? So it's a very interesting concept also to be in, and there's a lot of details also around it, because when it comes to things like fairness, right, or transparency, then what is transparency? It's like if you dive in, and that's what I'm going to talk more about in the at the conference, is basically sort of really trying to operationalize the concepts of transparency, of fairness, of environmental impact, for example, in terms of actual metrics and applying it to specific types of models out there. And just to give you a glimpse of it, like within the fairness area, you can talk about bias detection and bias mitigation in various types of models and in various ways, because it's not just one way. There's like a lot of different ways, and they can be applied throughout the different phases and stages of AI development, right, and deployment and operation. So it's also quite complex to implement these processes. And the same goes for transparency, right? If you talk about transparency, you talk about it as transparency to who? Is it about transparency to the internal stakeholders of the company? Is it about transparency to the users of the model? Or is it about transparency to the general public, right? And I think that I'm hearing from the legal community is that they're talking about disclosure, right? So not just being transparent in terms of well, this is the way that we develop this model, but also actually releasing at least parts or parts of the model, parts of the data set, parts of the metrics, to sort of be public about the types of models that are being deployed and worked. And this is a little bit feeding into the trend of some of the big tech companies out there. Also, is that I think we're moving into a new wave of transparency in the AI world, where it's about disclosing some of the information that we before maybe would hold very close to our bodies because we were scared of it being sort of exposed. But now, as it being more and more sort of a general business thing, then it becomes more and more sort of acceptable to sort of release these things. And actually, in the public sector, looking at Canada and also looking at the EU AI Act, there are areas around disclosing information about what kind of models you have, what kind of risk exposure they have, and so on. So opening up a world of basically AI registries or model registries where you can sort of expose the models that you have running in your company. And I think that's a really good sort of trend in the general marketplace.
Yes, I agree. I also think it's very good. I'm glad that we are reaching that stage where even public awareness of how AI can impact you or when you are interacting with AI, I think all that movement also requests really for more transparency, for disclosure. And in the end, it's not like it's a secret about the models itself, but it has a lot to do with how you or the data you use it, how you apply this model, how it integrates with whatever decision or logic that you have in the process. So I'm glad that we are at that stage. And also, I'm very happy to have you here in Berlin. You're coming from Copenhagen to deliver this keynote for our Data Lift Summit. I am very curious to learn more of the AI governance aspects in practice. And for you that is watching, you that are watching us now in YouTube, know that the keynote that Rasmus is giving on Berlin is going to be streamed live here in our YouTube channel. So you'll have the chance to also see it live and get more insights into the topic. And if you are in Copenhagen, the last thing I want to say is if you are in Copenhagen, you can also meet Rasmus in the AI Guild dinners because he has been organizing them 2 times already. So hopefully there will be a third one and you can see that on our page. Thank you, Rasmus, for that as well.
Yeah, just adding to that. So our Copenhagen AI Guild meetings is typically meeting up for a nice, comfortable dinner in the evening, and then discussing various use cases. So it's a very informal event, and we're going to take it up in September or something like that. So I hope that a lot of people are curious and want to join up. It is also a very sort of nerdy environment, so there'll be a lot of talks on codes and models and so on.
Yes, this is what we want, what we expect. Thanks. So I think that's it for today. Thank you for joining, Rasmus. And I don't know, let's get excited to make new contacts in person, to seeing the people that we already know. We'll be sharing technical content, practical insights for development. We will share career journeys and advice to the challenges you might be facing. So join us at the summit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.